Good evening and welcome to Growing and Gardening with Herbs. My name is David Lott and I'm the horticulture educator here in North Platte in the Lincoln, Logan, and McPherson County Extension Office. And I will be teaching the planting and growing side of the herbs, and I will pass it off for my coworker to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Pat Jones. I'm the Food Nutrition and Health Extension educator. I am based in Ainsworth, Nebraska, and I will be doing the foodie side of how to play with your herbs and spices after you grow those succulent, wonderful plants.
Okay, wonderful. We have a few resources that I'm going to share with you. There's not a PowerPoint per se tonight on my side, but you have 3 resources in your email that were sent to you. One was a herb program or from the University of Missouri Columbia, and one from Utah State Extension in Logan, Utah. And then we also have the wonderful booklet that Pat has put together on cooking with herbs. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started with the publications. And basically, this is just going to be a really nice, light, and easy conversation of working on how to grow herbs and how to grow them successfully, because they do bring a lot of variety to our garden environment, our home environment. They are a multi-purpose plant. They can attract beneficial insects. They serve as decoration. They can serve as part of the interior and exterior landscape. And they also are edible. So you can turn them into great flavoring for your foods and your beverages. So I want to show you 2 publications that I felt were really important, that really explain everything in a capsule for both of you to look at and read, so you can have these on files. So the herbs are they're really utilized in so many different ways, and they're grown in many different ways. And so I wanted to introduce you into starting herbs indoors, especially here where it's still cold, where you can grow your own herbs, and you can either put them into pots and larger containers, or you can grow them in a traditional garden bed setting or raised bed. So this is the publication from Utah that I felt was really good, that showed a lot of great information. But when we start with growing herbs from seed or growing herbs from a plant indoors, there's several really important conditions and things to think of. So when we first think about these plants, they can be started now and they can grow up and be nice transplantable size to put in a larger container or to put out in the garden. We also work quite a bit with daycares right now on different types of activities where children are learning how to plant seeds and understand nature. It's a great way for them to grow a plant that is non-toxic and also could be put into part of their meal. So we're working with early childhood educators across the state on this topic as well. So when we first get started, this is not an expensive process. It can be if you choose to make it one, but this is a very inexpensive process to get started and to have success with. So first things we need to think about are the different types of herbs that you would like to purchase or that you would like to grow. Many of our herbs can be bought in grocery stores, but by the time they show up in our local rural grocery stores, especially in western Nebraska, sometimes they're not in the best of condition or in the best of vigor. So it's really nice to grow your own, where you can grow the plants yourself, and so you have the variety that you have, plus you're growing them under the growing conditions that you want them to grow under, and reduce the amount of potential chemical residue in the growing process. So you can grow your own herbs, you can grow them in a healthy environment, and you know that you will have your own supply and not worry about having herbs that are either sickly that show up, or they're very expensive in those little plastic packages. And you can control the growing process. So that's really cool. One of the easiest set of growing conditions to start herbs are in our little disposable trays. You can use a wide variety of disposable trays. This is a food one, so always think of growing into food grade. Plastic is always important. So here's a long, narrow one that's shallow, or this is a plastic soup container that these are actually from restaurants that I have ordered takeout food, and I've washed these up in hot soap and water and let them dry out clearly so we could start. One of the things you do, you start with seedling potting mixture, which is finer. It's a very fine ground combination of peat moss and some other micronutrients just to get the seedlings started. Those are packaged already and available for you to purchase at the local retail center, garden center, or hardware store. So you would first measure your potting mix out. You will want to get it wet, not soggy wet, but moist, and fill it up to about 3/4 to 7/8 of the container full. And so you're ready, you've got your container. And in this case with the soup lid, I took the lid and I put a slit in it. And that's important for another function here in just a little bit. When we look at herbs vary in size seed-wise from fairly large seeds such as cilantro, where you can literally pick them up and move them and plant them, to very fine seed, which is hard to handle. And one of those is oregano that is very hard to handle. It's jet black and it's tiny. It looks something like pepper grains. So once you plant them, you don't know where they're going. So one thing that you can purchase that does help, and I do recommend, is a seed spreader. And it's a little seed planter that you can purchase, and it has the little reservoir where you put your seeds in, and then it has this dial that has the different opening sizes for the types of seed that you want. This is a very wonderful little multi-use tool for all types of seed, but it's great for herbs and those tiny seeds that are really hard to handle. So in this case, I have a package of parsley, curled parsley, that I'm going to pour in here into this planter. And in this case, you can see, if I bring it up to the camera, it's still pretty small, but you can see it. So you can just dial down to probably a 1 or a 2. This is the size of what a 2 looks like. It's pretty small here, not very big at all. We're going to put the cap on here, and we would have our moist potting soil in the cup. And we would simply just take this and we would tap that so the seed literally is going down into the container, and you can kind of evenly place it. The nice thing about this parsley example is that it is a lighter colored seed, so it will show up in contrast against dark, wet potting soil, or the seedling mix. That's what we're needing, is that seedling mix. So what do we do with the really fine seed that's really hard to move around because it is so tiny, and it also is really hard to see once it gets planted? Well, one of the really simple steps that I have learned is to take dry instant oatmeal. So the really fine instant oatmeal that you buy in the containers, you can put a couple spoonfuls in here with your seed, mix it up really good, and then you have the ability to, it's a little bit more product to work with, and it serves as a spreading agent that helps spread the seed out more evenly than it would have with your fingers or a spoon, or even in the seed spreader alone, is that you have the ability to control that. So in this case, I would use the number 5 dial setting. It is the largest setting. You can see how big that is. And so your oatmeal would be able to pass through that. So you mix your oatmeal and your seed up in here, and you just literally would scatter it right around evenly on top, and then you're done. So that helps spread out seeds so much easier. The oatmeal will degrade, and then your seeds will sprout on top of that. If you would like, you can take a very fine little pinch of dry seed starting mix and sprinkle it on top of your seeds where you had planted. You don't want to pat or bury these seeds because they're so fine, they'll get buried too deep on accident. So we just spread a little bit of dry potting starter seed mix on top, and then we put the lid on it, and then we will clamp it down. And that allows for moisture to build up and condensation. And when we get it with a nice light, then it helps bring it to get warm, and then that helps the starting process for it to germinate. It's really important not to totally seal these lids down because we have to have some carbon dioxide and some oxygen exchange. So you can lightly put this on and snap it down. If you have a lid that has a sharp snapping lid like this one, I cut the slit in here, just a little one, for the carbon dioxide and the oxygen to exchange and still get the condensation we need. So we will snap that on, and there you go. So your lid's not going to fall off. You have enough of a slit for your carbon dioxide and oxygen to exchange, for the sunlight to go through and get warm and start the condensation. And so once your seedlings have started, then all you have to do is take the lid off. And so here's another example of a portable storage container that you can buy that are disposable. This has basil in it. So the basil is growing. I took the lid off of this planter here. And so now I mist it every day with a misting bottle. And don't use hard water or water out of a water softener. Use bottled water or distilled water to avoid the buildup of heavy salts. So that's really important. So here's a spray bottle that we have out in the greenhouse that we use to grow our seedlings. So we fill that up, and it's got the pressure pump, and then we can produce a fine mist right on top of those plants. You can hear the hissing out here. But that helps provide the mist for things to keep growing. And once we get to about the 4-leaf stage, 4 true leaves, we have to get past the cotyledons or the seed leaves. We need 4 true leaves. Then we can slowly pick those up. We can pull them either with a plastic spoon, or we can use like the plant tag in this case. We can dig up those little seedlings. We always pull them up by the leaves. We never pull them up by the stem. If we pull them up by the stem, we can bruise the stem, and then they will bend over like this, or like a 45-degree angle. We call that dampening off, and the seedling dies. So never pull your seedlings by the stem. Always pull them by the cotyledon or the true leaves, and you can place them into larger cell packs or into pots, smaller pots, and then you can grow them individually. So the next thing you can do is the light. And lighting is really important with seedlings to get the right mix of blue and red light. So I have a grow light here. This is one that I bought out at the hardware store that has red and blue wavelengths. It tells us it's only a 9-watt bulb, so it's not very powerful, but it gives you the correct red and blue wavelengths that you need to grow transplants with. So it's really important to find something like this. Many of these are LEDs, so you can buy these LED light bulbs. They will get a blue or a pink cast, and they're wonderful to use. We need to have 6 hours of darkness. So we need to turn the light off manually or with the timer, and then we can supplemental light the rest of the time. And what I have here is a simple desk lamp that I bought off of a garage sale here in town. And so all I need to do is install my light bulb, and I can turn it on. So this one in case is pink. And so I can raise or lower that neck down or up as the seedlings are growing. So as the seedlings are just starting, we take that lid off of the container because we don't want any extra bacteria building onto our seedlings and causing some death there. So they're going to need the light. You're going to need to mist them, and you'll have that light down. And so as the seedlings grow, we generally just magically over time make that neck go up and let the seedlings grow, because we don't want them to stretch. If you use a true incandescent bulb, that's a lot of red wavelength, that's big, that causes those plants to stretch. And the internodes, which is the area of the stem between the leaves, just stretches and stretches and stretches, and then they get real weak and they fall over. We want nice short internodes to keep our herbs, our plants, our seedlings really well growing and nice and compact as possible. They will also transplant way easier if we have nice compact transplants to grow. If you want to start in a pot right off the bat instead of the small container, you can use a flower pot. And this is a flower pot that I've used several years in a row with the watering wicking well. So I put the wet potting mix in here. This is not quite up to the lip anymore because that potting seedling mix has settled. And I have little seedlings coming up right now, so I keep misting them. And I've taken the top off, so I have to mist these every day, and they're growing in the greenhouse. In a pot situation like this, I'm using cling wrap, and I cling wrap over the top, and I tape it down with simple Scotch tape, and just tape it down off to the sides, let that oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange in a corner. And then as your seedlings start to sprout, then you're going to take that layer off, start misting it every day, making sure it has adequate light, and watch these little seedlings start to pop up. The great thing about a container like this is that you can have more than one herb. I have 3 herbs. I have oregano, I have basil, and I have parsley. And so not everything's growing right now. The basil is what is up right now, but the oregano and the parsley will be growing. And so I have 3 herbs in one pot. And as that grows, I can have a variety. This is what we call a pizza garden or an Italian herb pot. And so I will harvest these herbs as they go along. So simply when you harvest, you want to make sure that they are, you have several sets of true leaves, so they're long enough to grow. And as this will grow 3 different herbs, some will grow faster than others, so you will have to trim those back. Always use a nice sharp paring knife to trim that off and allow for new growth to come back. You don't want to crush the xylem and the phloem on accident with a pair of scissors. Always a good sharp paring knife does a really good job. So when we grow herbs, we want to let them grow. And when they get to the point where they're going to start to set buds to flower is, for the most part, the right time to really, trim those flowering heads off. We don't want them to go to seed. We want to let them grow up and harvest. And then that makes them fuller in the container too. So that's a win-win situation. The only one that you would like to really focus on growing to bloom is the mint family, because the oils, which are where you get the great flavor, the great strong flavor of all of our herbs, is at flowering, and it's best for mint to flower and then you harvest. So unless you have to have some mint, you can pluck leaves off and use that for cooking or whatever earlier than that. But it's important when you have more than one herb to understand what's going to grow faster and what's going to grow slower, so you don't crowd everything out. And if you want, you can literally take a spoon and dig a plug out of this herb pot to start other herb pots. So it works great. So if you want to do a round pot, or you can do a window box type pot, works excellent. And this is something that is highly portable. You can grow it under the grow light inside. You can take it out. You can be on your patio. They like to have a minimum of 8 hours of full sun, so they really will love the sun and really take off. If there's a storm or bad weather, you can pull these in, whether into the house or into the garage or out of harm's way, and then move them. Herbs are planted in amongst a lot of your perennials and annuals in flower gardens. It brings a lot of beneficial insects in. So it is a win-win for that. There are some herbs that we call garden gremlins, and mint is one of the worst offenders of that group. So unless you like mint growing all over the flower bed and into the lawn and possibly under your sidewalk or on the other side of your driveway, be very wary of its very aggressive growth and its forms. So mint and mint family plants are best grown in containers where you can control them more so than others. So it's really a great situation. You can grow in patches. Herbs do better planted in patches than in nice, neat rows. And this publication from the University of Missouri gives some great descriptions of those herbs and pictures. We want to make sure that when we prepare our planting area for our herbs, that it's really well-drained soil. So if you have a clay soil that's heavy, or if you have a very sandy soil, such as along the lake or in a river bottom, to add compost prior to planting any of that, break up that heavy clay soil to add to the drainage, or in the case of the sand, to help with the water holding and nutrient holding capacity. So that's really important. I'm going to scroll down here with this University of Missouri publication that you have. You can propagate, talks about different types of propagation, and it talks about the different types of herbs. So there are herbs for soups, there are herbs for desserts, there are herbs for beverages, there are herbs that are for different types of meat and protein. Some are better for salads and other vegetables, just a wonderful variety. So it talks about some of these are perennial, some of these are annual, some of these are annual that will reseed themselves. So they will drop lots of seeds, and then you will constantly have another set of herbs coming back. So they also, several of them are very good at attracting butterflies and butterfly larvae, and parsley and dill are the two most favorite. So they attract swallowtail and the monarch butterfly larva as a food plant. So they will build chrysalis after they gouge themselves as larvae. They will go through and build a chrysalis, which is different than a cocoon. They'll build a chrysalis and will emerge in the hatch. So if you like butterfly gardening, adding herbs into the butterfly garden is a wonderful choice as well. So you get the utility of the landscape use, the portability of indoors and outdoors, keeping these pests like the mint from growing all over the place, unless you really want them to grow all over the place, and they will take off. They also benefit bringing in beneficial insects, and they also help with the butterfly population. So I don't want to go into any more long descriptions of these plants, just that they are so versatile. You can use them year round. So once fall comes, you can take that pot in and you can bring it in. You can put it in the grow light, under the grow light to grow. I also have an example of, this is stripping celery. This is the type of celery that you grow, that you would harvest for soups. The leaves are perfect. And I've grown this in a food grade 5-gallon bucket. So if you're going to grow this, you need to put emphasis on a food grade bucket. We put the N Extension logo on it. We drill holes in the bottom of the bucket so we have drainage. Herbs have to have good drainage to grow, especially our fine rooted herbs such as our lavender and our rosemary. They have very fine fibrous roots, and they will root rot if they do not have very well-drained soils or grown in very well-drained potting media. They have to be moist but not soggy, and they cannot dry out. So they are kind of fickle in that sense, but that's what makes them so neat to grow. And buckets are a great way to go. You can fill the bottom with a couple layers of coffee filters or old napkins or paper towels or newsprint, and then add your seedling mix for your transplants or your seeds to grow in, and that allows for water to drain out. So when we water a container, we always water at the base of the container and let it gently flow through until the water totally drains out. And so in this case, this celery's lived well over a year and it has had a good life and it keeps on growing. We keep on snipping it and we have a very nice, healthy plant in the center. So this is an example that I like to show in programs that have a lot of success, that you can grow your plants indoors and you can enjoy them. And you know you have that favorite herb available and you're not at the mercy of the local grocery store or garden center to have something for you to use for foods. Any questions on the herb growing side that you might have? I will tell you, I like growing sage. Even the plain old common sage is great. It has a beautiful purple flower and it will attract all kinds of butterflies and moths and beneficial insects. So I kept it growing just for the sake of it. It's a great attractant and a great feature in the landscape for butterflies and butterfly gardening. So, and it's a cheap seed to purchase. It's not at all. So you can get a multiple win-win with growing herbs for your garden as well as your culinary tastes. So I'm ready to jump off and turn the program over to Pat on the cooking with herbs.
So in that bucket, what was the herb?
That is called stripping celery.
It isn't lovage?
No, it's not lovage.
Oh, okay.
Here's celery. Though lovage is another good one to grow as well.
It looked like lovage.
And you can buy single celery plants, for instance, at the greenhouse or the garden center, and you can plant them and they'll grow like this as well. And I just take care of it. What's really nice about herbs is they rarely have an insect problem. The only thing that might be an insect problem is when the butterfly larvae are chewing, and I just let them chew on the plants. That's great because that's what they're doing for. So,
Okay.
it's a great little plant to have around, and 5-gallon buckets are wonderful. But my water wicking flower pot also works really good.
So I'm going to jump in right here with David for just a second. You're talking about a lot of them flower, like sage will flower, chive flowers, and people don't realize those are edible flowers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they work really well. If you're trying to make, a dish look pretty, it's really awesome. So yeah. All right. Any other questions for David before I totally take over from him?
I'll jump off so we have enough bandwidth so Pat can demonstrate.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. So now that we have an idea of how to get some of those herbs that we really like to use and experiment and use them as flavor palettes, we also need to understand there's a lot of benefits that come with having your herbs and being able to grow them along with the spices. With herbs and spices, you're able to cut back on some of those salts that you have, some of the fats and some of the sweet, but still have a powerful flavor and maintain a stronger health factor. Herbs also, and herbs are going to add that sour taste, that sweet taste, that zangy taste, a little salty taste. I had someone ask me one time how to get that salty taste or that zing from the salt because they had been told that they had to cut back on salts. And I said, a lot of people use lemon powder, and lemon powder is extremely easy to create in your home. If you have a lemon, before you squeeze it, clean it or wash it off with some water, dry it off, zest it, and let that zest dry. And then you can run it through. If you have I use a coffee grinder all the time, but you can use a mortar and pestle and just grind it down to a fine powder and add that as a flavoring. It's not going to be salty, but it will be zingy. And it works really well because of the oils and stuff in there. Excuse me. We do have some natural meat tenderizers that are part of the herb and spice family also. Sorry. One of those that really stands out is ginger, and you'll see me play with ginger tonight. I'm going to do a teriyaki marinade, and we'll add some ginger into that. So sorry. The other thing that herbs do is they're a phytonutrient. And so what that means is they help with our antioxidants and our anti-inflammatories. And so they kind of help keep that in control, along with some blood sugar levels. They're supposed to be able to help with the memory function and your thinking. They're supposed to be able to help with fight infections, and they're known to help boost your immunity. So there's a lot of things that herbs are good for. So it's really kind of exciting to play with herbs and just experiment. The goal for tonight is I don't want anybody to walk away afraid to try something with their herbs. Herbs are they're just fun. So I'm going to start off with basil. I have a port, and David was talking about, your plants and how long it is. Well, you can tell this is a hothouse plant. Anyway, it's a cute little basil plant that I picked up yesterday down in Grand Island. And I don't remember which store I bought it at. But this one here actually is not a hothouse one, but so you can see how much closer it is, but you can also tell it's not mature. This was one that was in those little containers that David was talking about that you get at the grocery stores, and sometimes they're not real healthy. So if you look down here, you can see the unhealthy leaves. These here would have to be plucked in order to use them. When we start working with basil, and you can do this with a lot of other plants also, but we do what's called a chiffonade. And some of you already know what that is, and some of you are learning. So a chiffonade, and basil works well with this, it's a soft leaf. So you roll it, and you basically are going to cut it in tiny strips, just like this. And the idea behind this, and can you see how tiny? They're not very big. If you're not comfortable with knifing skills, you can also use a pair of scissors, and just make sure your fingers are in safe distance. And you can sit here and cut this also. The idea behind some of this, and you can do this with a lot of plants. You can do this with basil. You could do this with your cilantro. You can do this with mint. I mean, there's a lot that you can do this with. The idea behind it is when you get ready to use it in storage, what you have is you have these nice little cuttings, and this is just basil, and you put it in your ice cube tray, just like this. And what you'll do is you're going to take and you're going to fill it. Grab my water here. You can fill it with water, or you can fill it with oil, and just like that. That's how you can freeze a lot of your herbs. When you freeze them like this, then it goes right on into whatever you're cooking. So if you're making a stew or you're making a soup, you just pop that ice cube out of the tray and you put it right on into what you're cooking. If you take and just let that melt down, the cells in there have broken, and so it'll be kind of mushy. And with the cells broken, the flavors actually go into the water. You can use oils also. A lot of people use olive oil. And the olive oil will pick up those flavors, because most of the time those flavors are an oil base, but sometimes they can be a water base. So yeah, you can fill up a whole tray. What you do is you fill up the whole tray and you pop it out, put these little cubes in a bag, and you have a bag of basil that as you're cooking during the winter time or whenever your basil's not fresh, you have it right there, and it's very usable. Okay, the other thing I wanted to touch on is cilantro. And I don't know, some people like cilantro, some people are not crazy about cilantro. But this, I'm going to turn my little camera up here just a little bit. This is cilantro. And the thing people don't realize about cilantro is it actually comes from the coriander. It's actually the coriander plant that cilantro comes from. For some people, the reason they don't like cilantro is it tastes soapy in their mouth. So, if you're making something for a guest or anybody, you want to make sure that they like cilantro. It's really a selective flavored palette. But here again, you can freeze it. If you notice, I have this in a jar. This is a storage technique to keep them fresh. When I bought these, what I did is, they come in a nice little bundle, and I set and trim the end off just like this, and I put them straight into the water. And I tell you what, these look like I just picked them. They've soaked water up since yesterday. Doesn't always work for all plants, but there are a few that it works well with. Okay, I have a very sickly looking piece of garlic chive here. And the reason I wanted you to see garlic chive is most chive is round, like an onion, like green onions, it's round. Garlic chive, it has a flat leaf, which is really kind of cool. And it's a milder flavor than if you go and use a garlic bulb. A lot of people don't burp. Some people will burp the garlic bulb. They very seldom will they burp the garlic chive. And they go great in just about anything. Eggs, anything you use garlic in. But like I said, it's a milder flavor. Okay, then we have dill, my poor dill. I was showing David my dill earlier. It's kind of sickly looking, but it'll do the trick. One of the things I wanted to show you with dill, and I think this is really kind of cool, to dry dill, what works well is to take a paper bag, like this paper bag here. You take the leaf end and you put it in, you leave an inch of stem out, and then you just gather this bag around like this. So, and then you're going to hang it just like that. The idea behind it is as this dries, all those pieces of dill are going to fall into the bottom of the bag. So you're not going to lose any of your little important pieces that help add flavor to all kinds of foods. The other one I want to talk a little bit about is parsley. And parsley is more than just something that goes pretty on your plate. And all of you probably know that, parsley actually is handy on plates, especially if you have something that has garlic or onion in it and you're on a date or you're out with somebody that's significant or you're with a group of people and you don't want to walk around with that onion garlic breath. Go ahead and eat your parsley. It's one of the things that is a breath freshener along with being pretty on your plate. We use a lot of dried parsley and a lot of this is going to be dried. I'll set it out tonight to dry because I am out of dry parsley. So a lot of this will be set out to dry. Parsley is also very high in vitamin K, known as potassium. So it's kind of handy to have around. Okay, moving right along. If you notice in your book, I'm moving right through your book. If you go to page 7, it talks a little bit about paprika. One of the things that people don't realize about paprika is that it actually comes from a pepper. And I've shown you, it's just a little pepper. It's not hot, but it gives it that rich red color and that rich flavoring that goes with it. Here again, this herb is high in vitamin A. People don't realize a lot of your herbs are going to be high in different vitamins and minerals, which is really handy. Turmeric. So when I started getting into herbs, I laughed because I had never seen a turmeric root. And if you look at the picture in your booklet, you'll see a picture of a turmeric root, and it looks like an orange worm. It seriously does. When I saw it at the grocery store, I'm like, you've got to be kidding. But once you take it home and you grate it down and you let it dry a little bit, the flavor palette is just amazing. A lot of fresh herbs or spices, when you dry them down or you use them, you'll have a stronger flavor palette than if you use dried. But your dried is still a really good choice. When you're working with dried and you want to know if it's still usable, take a little bit. And this here, I'll be honest, this is freshly ground nutmeg, so it'll be really powerful. But just put a little bit in your hand, rub it around till it gets warm, and it picks up the oils in your hand, and you can kind of see how you can tell it's getting warm in there. And I can smell it from here. I don't have to get it real close, but then you smell it. And you can tell if it's fresh. If you smell it and you can tell what it is, then you're good to go. If you smell it and you go, what was that? Then it's time to buy it. Then it's time to buy something fresh, because then there's no more oils and there's no more flavoring left in that poor ground herb or spice that you have handy there. Okay, moving on along, I have some sage here. And here again, you can tell I got these out of those packets because they're really sad looking little pieces of sage. But the health benefit of sage is it helps improve your mood and cognitive function. So I use a lot of sage with my pork. So I've also been known to put sage under the skin of like chicken or turkey. I use it in dressings. I use a lot of sage. So don't be afraid to play with sage. Sage goes really well with pork. Oregano, I think oregano is fun. This is some fresh oregano. And here again, you can tell it's kind of sad. One of the things I wanted to show with oregano and also show it again with rosemary is the way to strip it. So instead of sitting here picking off each leaf one at a time like this, you can actually do what we call stripping it. So you grab it and you have to get past the little soft parts. And you can just, it should just peel right down. We'll try it again. We'll do it again on time, but it's so much easier to do that. And then you can sit there and cut it without picking each piece apart. But when it has the tender, so you have to get down to that little tougher stem there in order for that to work really, really well. Okay, in your book, you'll notice that it talks about stevia a little bit. So stevia is kind of interesting. It is an herb. I've had a lot of people ask me about stevia. There's a couple of different plant species or varieties, but so you have to be careful what variety you get. Because if it's not the correct variety, it won't have the glycosides in their leaf and they'll be really, really bitter. So be really careful what stevia plant you get. And if you notice in your writing, I talk about the 2 different types of stevia plants. So you want to make sure you get one of those. Those are glycoside producing stevia plants. Stevia is actually, so when you're working with stevia, it actually is stable at high temperatures. It can be used with high or low acid foods. But here's the catch with stevia. When you're baking with it, it lacks the ability to add texture. It doesn't caramelize. It doesn't feed, like sometimes you put it in bread to feed your yeast. It doesn't feed the yeast. It doesn't help tenderize any of your batters. So like you're making a cake, it's not going to be a tender product. It's going to be more of a tough, chewy type product. In order to use stevia as a liquid, you have to go through an extraction process, which is quite lengthy. Or you can actually dry the leaves. Once they're dry, use a mortar and pestle, grind them down, and you can actually use that powder in your baking and stuff. You have to remember the ratio, though. There's a 1 to 10 ratio when it comes to using stevia. So like 1 teaspoon is equal to 10 teaspoons of regular sugar. So there is a ratio that you really have to watch because stevia is so much sweeter than any of your sugar products. So when you get ready to use it, you just be really careful because there's going to be little green specks. So like if you're using it to sweeten cereal, you might notice some little green specks. If you're baking if you're baking a white cake with it, there'll be little green specks in there. It's not going to be a whole lot, but some people will go, well, what is that? It's kind of noticeable. I made Kool-Aid one time with powdered stevia. A lot of people didn't want to drink my Kool-Aid because it had green floaty things in there. And it actually was kind of funny. So I explained to them what it was and what was going on with it. So it was great. So anyway, when you get ready to do stevia and Kool-Aid, just be really, really careful. Okay, then we go on into thyme. Let me pull my poor thyme out here. This is kind of a bushy looking little goober. So this is the thyme, and and he's been sitting in water trying to keep him kind of fresh, but I'm still getting leaves all over the place. Here again, you can strip these, just super easy. Make sure you get down in here and it just slides right off. There we go. That's the easiest way to strip to strip that. Thyme goes really well with rosemary and oregano. And it's actually, thyme is a key ingredient in a lot of Southern foods. So like gumbo or your Cajun dishes, it's very popular with those. These are, thyme is actually considered a spice too. So here's a couple other spices I brought in. These are peppercorn spices, and I buy them whole. I'll put them on here on the table. There we go. I buy them whole because whole lasts longer than if it's ground. So these peppercorns are probably about, I'd say year and a half old. I grind fresh peppercorns for my mom for her fresh pepper. I spoiled her a couple of years ago. Once you go fresh ground, it's really, really hard to go back to the already ground stuff you get at the store. This has flavor that's just wonderful. When you go to the store, it's already been ground and it's starting to get some age on it. A lot of you already know what cloves look like. A lot of people don't use cloves unless it's around, Thanksgiving time or Christmas or Easter. They decorate it with the ham, and it gives ham a wonderful, wonderful flavor. But you can use cloves, when you make cookies. I'm going to use cloves tonight in a pumpkin pie mix that we're going to put together. So the only thing about cloves, and people don't realize, there's a lot of oils in cloves. So when I use that in my little coffee grinder, I have to really make sure I clean it well because it does leave a film. And it's a really tough film of oily product. These are allspice. And I brought these in because a lot of people don't know what they look like. And I wanted to make sure everybody knew what these little goobers look like. This is allspice. And here again, just grind them down and you'll be amazed how much fresher flavor that you have going into your foods and stuff. Here again, I buy whole for the same reason I grind it up myself. This is a nutmeg, and you can tell I've ground on it. And it takes me about a year to use a whole one of these. But they look kind of funny on the inside. I'll raise that up. It looks like it's kind of wormy. It's just funny looking, but it's not. That's just the way they are. That's nutmeg for you. The other comment I wanted to make also is on the bay leaves. A lot of people don't realize bay leaves come from the laurel plant. And I think David made reference to a laurel plant as part of an herb garden. They use laurel plants in landscapes all over the place. Went to a motel one time and there was a couple laurel plants out there in the landscape and I laughed. They use rosemary in landscapes all the time. Let me grab my rosemary here. So yeah, they use rosemary out there because rosemary is pretty. It makes a beautiful plant. But here again, you can strip it the same way. Just pull those little leaves right off. Oops, I deheaded it instead, but here we go. You can use them just like this. And when you're done using them fresh and you have leftovers and it's like, what do I do with my leftovers? Put them on a tray and dry them out. It doesn't take very long. Put them in a warm room and just let them warm up and dry out. A lot of these that I have here tonight that I'm showing you, they will become a dried product here in no time at all. Cumin, a lot of people like to use cumin in Hispanic foods. Here again, buy the seed. I didn't bring any seed in tonight. Buy the seed and grind it, and it'll be. It's just amazing how much fresher flavored you have. Most of you are familiar with celery and garlic and onion. Those are the most common used herbs and spices. And so I will let you read those in the booklet because those are just common. And there's so many varieties of onions. We have the green onions, we have red onions, we have white onions, we have sweet onions. I mean, the variety goes on, and onions are actually fairly easy to grow. If I can grow them, I'm a brown thumber. You can grow them. I'm just saying. Some general rules, just so you know, you only use 1 part dry to 3 parts fresh. So here again, it's a 1 to 3 ratio when you're going from dried herbs to fresh herbs. And then when you're doubling a recipe, you don't, so if you're doubling a recipe and it calls for a teaspoon of nutmeg, don't put 2 teaspoons of nutmeg in. You only want to put a teaspoon and a half. Otherwise it's going to be overpowering. Some people like that flavor, some people don't, but that's just a general rule for adding, for when you're doubling and adding in your herbs and spices. When you're making cooked things like stews and soups, those type of things, always add your herbs and spices in last because they're a delicate and they're fragile, especially for like basil and oregano and some of the softer spices. Rosemary is tougher, it can handle it. Thyme is tougher, it can handle it. Sage is another one of those, it's tender. So you have to look at what type of herb you're going to use and determine when you want to add that in. We get a lot of questions in regards to herbs and spices and oil infusion. So I did add a page in the booklet in regards to herbs, spices, and oil infusions. You have to be really, really careful because there is a number of cases of botulism, and it's just, botulism is just debilitating and it can be fatal. So it's a form of food poisoning. So you just have to be ever so careful. I did make a reference to 3 websites that actually walk you through a step-by-step process if you want some oil infused. But here again, a lot of them say if you're going to infuse your oil, make sure you refrigerate it. Commercial type of infused oils, they have a special acidification done to them to make them keep the bacterial growth at a minimum. Alrighty, we talked quite a bit about storing herbs already. We talked about putting them in the jar. Let me change my camera here real quick. Okay, so we talked about putting them in jars to store them. Some will be stored outside of the refrigerator. Some will be stored in the refrigerator. This is my sage. It is slowly coming back to life. It's not as limp as it was when I first put it in the water earlier today. So that's one way to store them. This also helps keep them fresh. And it talks right there, it talks about their fragile herbs, which is your basil, your chervil, your coriander, those type. And it talks about more sturdy ones. Parsley is actually a fairly sturdy plant. Oregano, rosemary, savory, thyme, those are more of your sturdy ones. When you get ready to, if you want to keep them at home in the refrigerator, a really good idea is to take a paper towel, dampen it just a little bit with some water, and it doesn't take, you don't want it wet, but you just want it damp. So it doesn't take very much to dampen it, and that would be plenty right there. So if I was at home, what I would do is I would take this and let's just pick some sage. We'll stick some sage in here. And if this is going to be at my house, I don't take it up to the leaves because I think it causes the leaves to deteriorate faster. But I would take and fold it down like this and then take and put it into a plastic bag. Grab one here. Take and put it in a plastic bag and just kind of leave it just like this. Just tuck it. Oops, sorry. I need to get back into the camera. Just take and tuck it in like this. And that way it helps maintain the moisture, and this will suck that moisture up out of that paper towel. Check it. You have to check it often to make sure that that paper towel stays moist. But it will keep in the refrigerator a whole lot longer if you wrap it in a paper towel and then just kind of stick it in a baggie. Baggies make a world of difference. We already talked about the paper bag and hanging it upside down. We already talked about putting it in the ice cube tray. If you're following through the book, I'm just trying to stay right with you here. Butter. It's so much fun to make herb butter. I love herb butter, especially on those cheesy biscuits A lot of people call them Red Lobster biscuits, but they have cheese and garlic and that type of stuff. I love to add herb butters onto that. And I'm trying to think, here again, I use a lot of sage because I like to bring that flavor forward, but it depends on what you're serving it with. So, you know, think about what you're serving it with to add the flavors. If you're doing like a steak and you want that butter on top of that steak, it's really fun to do garlic and rosemary and some Italian parsley. And if you want a little bit more zing, put a little lemon, put, you know, that lemon powder I was talking about, put a little bit of that in there. It'll add that flavor. It's always best to use room temperature butter because it mixes easier. And then it's easier to spread on your different products. If you want it to stay firm, like you're putting it on the steak, go ahead and put it in the refrigerator and let it become a firm little patty. Because when you put it on there, or if you want a chicken breast, when you put it on there, you want it to be firm and melt slowly because you want it to go down into your food. Flavored waters, be creative. Oh my goodness. Flavored waters are the best thirst quencher there is. And my favorite is to use a little bit of rosemary. So I have me here just a little glass of, and at home, I use a pitcher. But here again, pretend this is a pitcher and just take and bruise it. You have to bruise your spices sometimes to get that flavor to come through. So just take and bruise it a little bit and you'll be able to smell it. And you just stick it in there. It's add that, and I'll put a little bit of basil in there. I love the smell of basil. I think they ought to make a perfume basil. Put that in there, and there we go. When I'm at home, I'll add some orange to that, and it just brings a little zing to that. So just kind of some information too, when you get ready to go buy already grown herbs and spices and you're not sure if you're going to like that flavor, don't be afraid to go ahead and pick off a piece of the leaf and just munch on it. So, Lord, I hope this is partially because I don't like cilantro, but just take a little piece, pop it in your mouth. You're right, this is cilantro. But so now you know, I don't like cilantro. It tastes like I have soap in my mouth. And so just if you want to know how it tastes, play with it just a little bit. It's amazing. And I have found there are certain varieties of basil I don't like. There's certain varieties of basils I absolutely love. Just kind of play with the flavor palettes. And once you taste them kind of like this, then you can go, okay, now let's see. I can see that with some potatoes. And that would go, maybe that would go good with some garlic. So in your book, I also put in some vegetable flavor ideas, but you kind of have to have an idea what those flavors taste like before you just start dumping. So don't be afraid to go grazing in the herbal areas. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is, let me get my stuff reorganized here. We are going to make 3 items. And the first item is going to be the dry soup mix. I use this dry soup mix all the time. It makes a great dip, especially if you're in a hurry and you want things to go. So here's a trick of mine. Okay, so on my lid, I have the recipe. Oops, a little blurry there, sorry. I have the recipe and I use canning jars. This is my canning jars. I use little canning jars all the time. I only make small amounts at a time so I can make it fresh all the time. And so with that in mind, what we're going to do is we are going to add the 5 spices. So we start with turmeric. So I'll bring this over here. We're going to add a little turmeric. Grab a spoon here to help kind of get that out of there. I want every little morsel. It makes it good. Okay, so we're going to add the turmeric. I am adding sugar. We are adding some salt. And this is where you can adjust this to your own taste. So at my own house, I don't add this much salt. I only use half that amount. It calls for a teaspoon, so I thought I would stick with the recipe tonight for everybody. But at home, I only do a half a teaspoon of salt because I try really hard to keep my sodium intake down. It's a blood pressure thing. It's a health thing. Okay, so then we'll have, I have some dry parsley. So here's this parsley was fresh about 5 hours ago. I learned a trick on how to dry this in the microwave. It worked wonderfully. You just lay it between 2 pieces of paper towel, and you stick it in your microwave and you run it about 2 minutes. You just kind of watch it, and when it comes out, it'll be dry just like this. I crunched it up in the paper towel, put it in my famous canning jars, and voila, I have dried parsley for tonight. And here is my onion powder. There we go. So I have my dry onion soup mix ready to go. I'm going to shake that up. So then what am I going to make with it tonight? I am making roasted cauliflower tonight. So with roasted cauliflower, I am going to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm just going to pour that in here. I'm a bag woman. I use bags for a lot of things. And then on this, you kind of want to eyeball. So I've got a whole head in here. I want it really flavorful. So I'm going to add probably I'm going to add a teaspoon now. I'm going to pop this closed. I've got a little air in there so I can shake. I'm going to shake. Boy, noisy. Okay, so now you can kind of see I've got some white in there. So I want a little bit more. So I'm going to add another teaspoon. A nice healthy teaspoon. How's that? And now I'm going to shake that up again. So when I get home, this is going to go on a cookie sheet and it's going to go right into my oven. It's about 350. And everything that's in here is something that came from your garden and something that you did. You know exactly what's in that flavor palette, and it's something you can feel comfortable with. So you know there's no pesticides, there's no preservatives, there's no additives. It's all just plain cauliflower, your onion soup mix, a little olive oil. Doesn't that look good? It just looks good like sitting there, doesn't it? Whew, look at that. You can imagine that toasted just a little bit. It'll be ready to go. The other one I want to do real quick, and this is more of a dessert type item. Let me get my jars out of my way here. This is more of a dessert item. It is going to be pumpkin pie spice. Let me get some of my, hold on. Just like at home, you got to clean the counter. There we go. Okay, so this is pumpkin pie spice. It starts with 3, and again, I have my canning jars here. It starts with 3 tablespoons of ground cinnamon. And yes, this is fresh. It takes a long time to get it down to powder. A lot of times I will go ahead and buy ground cinnamon just because I go through it quickly and I go through a lot of it. Okay, so here again, you'll add some ginger, you'll add some nutmeg. This is my fresh ground nutmeg. Get that in there. And ooh, I can smell that. This is some allspice. And we have some clove. There we go. And I'm actually making this for an office thing tomorrow. And somebody made the comment they didn't like ginger. So I left the ginger out and I think we'll be fine. When I get this home, after I get done making my dip, I'll add some ginger to it. That's one nice thing about making your own mixes. You can adjust them for what your flavor palette is. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I shake that really good. And then what I'm going to do is, I have some cream cheese here. Not very much, just a little cream cheese. And this is double bagged for a reason, and I'll show you why here in just a second. So it's, you know, these are just being creative with what you got, right? So I'm adding probably about, yeah, let's do a teaspoon of our pumpkin pie spice mix in there. And this, like I said, that's 4 ounces of cream cheese. I'm also going to add a little bit of sugar. And I'm going to go with the same amount of sugar as what I did with the spice mix. Okay, so I have that double bag because I'm just using little sandwich bags here, and they're just little cheapy ones. I can seal that. There we go. And the second bag. The reason I have it in the second bag is when I start doing this, it helps keep it from squirting out. So here again, I told you I was a bag woman. I use bags for a lot of things. So I'm going to mix that up here real quick. I don't know what there is about it being in the second bag that keeps them from popping. It's probably the pressure from my fingers that keeps that from busting that bag. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to pull the second bag off so you can see it's starting to mix really nice. If you have little kids around, they love doing this kind of stuff. Just tell me, you have to be gentle and they'll take care and they'll be careful. It's just fun. They're probably more careful than I am. Okay, so as you see, this is starting to come together really nice. So here's the other advantage of having a second bag. Let me get this pushed down here because I'm going to show you. And a lot of you probably already do this little trick, which is really handy. I love learning new tricks from people. It's just, that's the fun of cooking. Everybody's got a trick someplace, and getting them to share it is always fun. Okay, so now I'm going to put this back into the second bag. Now here comes the tricky part. You have to find the corner of both bags and you bring them together. And I'm actually going to use it as a piping mechanism. There we go. Have my handy dandy little scissors here. And I'm going to use this. This is just a little vanilla wafer and just a little bit on here, just like that. And it is really, really good. The other thing you can use, let me grab one here real quick, is an apple slice. And this one's kind of big, but I'm going to go ahead and just do, I'm just going to watch my bagel pop now. I'm just going to go ahead and do just a little circle around. And you can make them prettier, but there we go. Nice little apple slice. So, okay, so that's the dessert. And I put my cookie in the middle. Like I said, these are quick and easy. And I always like to do marinades because a lot of times we do marinades with a lot of our spices because we're trying to get that flavor palette impacted a little bit. So here again, yes, the bag woman again. This here won't take very long. And then in your book, it's called the teriyaki. It is the teriyaki marinade. Let me find it here real quick. There we go. It's the teriyaki marinade. And if you want it, it's on page 21. But here again, it is a half cup of soy sauce. It is, and this is real pineapple juice. I even still have pineapple juice pieces in there. Real pineapple. So pineapple juice. And it calls for rice wine vinegar or sweet rice wine. I prefer to use apple cider vinegar. And so in it goes. To me, it just helps break down that marinade. Depends on the kind of meat I have. I was out of brown sugar, and brown sugar or sugar and molasses will make brown sugar. So I have created my own brown sugar to go in here. So I'm going to go ahead and toss in molasses. My room is really cold, so that molasses doesn't want to move real easy, but it will dissolve quickly here. The other one is we need a half a cup of sugar to go into this. There's a half a cup of sugar. Here is our garlic. And again, I want to get all those nice little flavor bits in there. And here is some ginger. And what I'm going to do is seal that up, turn it down, give that a good shake. And in the book, it talks about cooking it on the stove. And that's always a good idea because it's going to help those sugar particles break up and become soft. Right now, I just have the granules in there. Oh my goodness, that smells good. That will work too. But I would recommend going ahead and cooking that because it just makes those sugar particles become break down and get into the marinade a whole lot easier. Okay, what I'm putting in tonight is pork loin, and I'm making a spot here for my pork loin. All right, so you can see I have five pork loins. These are 5-ounce pieces, and I'm just going to lay them in here, just like this. I usually lay them to the side so they're flat, and just do another one over here. And it's like, oh, she's getting close to the edge. Yep, I'm going to bring it right on down. We'll put another one right here. And I'm going to put another one right here. This is an amazing teriyaki recipe. All right, so you see I have them in there. I'm going to go ahead and seal it down. As I seal it down, I'm going to try and get as much air out of this as I can. So I go just so far, and then I start pressing it down. There we go. And now you can guess what I'm having for supper, right? I'm having marinated pork loin, roasted soup, onion soup, cauliflower with my pumpkin pie spice dessert. There we go. How about that? Okay, I'm wiping my hands off with some wet here because I was playing with pork. So I'm getting that cleaned off, and I'll switch. Let's get my fingers wet. I'll switch that camera back up. I hope there's something here that everybody can use. I just find it fun to cook with spices and herbs. It's fun to grow them, and then it's fun as you're cooking to reach around and snip it and cut it up and put it in whatever you're eating, because it's like, wow, I'll never forget the very first time I did this. I had grown chives and garlic chives and all kinds of stuff, and I was making scrambled eggs, and I went, oh, I can use my chives because I don't have any onion. And it was so fun. It was like, oh, so the goal is don't be afraid to use herbs and spices to cook with, grow them, enjoy them, and you'll be amazed what they can do for your flavors that you're trying to create. So David, I'm opening it back up for questions. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, ideas? I love to glean ideas from people. If you've had something that you've used herbs and spices in and you found it successful, I would love to hear about it.
Any questions, Marilyn?
No, I don't have any questions.
Do you have any shares?
Oh, I use a lot of my herbs in pickling. So I use the dill, onions, what else? Garlic. Those kind of things go in a lot of pickling.
So do you, now are these ones that you have grown, Marilyn?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So do you use your dill, like, do you do fish dishes? Because dill goes really well with fish.
Not really a lot of fish.
Okay.
I don't usually have fresh dill when we're doing fish, and we don't have access to real fresh fish.
Okay. I don't either. I use frozen a lot.
Right.
But what I do when I do have fresh dill, I do take and dry it. I use that bag dryer all the time. And dill will keep quite a while dried in the cupboards.
And then the cilantro, I like to use that in some types of Mexican cooking dishes. Ceviche is really good for using some herbs. Trying to think what else. Just putting it in a recipe where when I have the fresh, I haven't done a lot of drying or freezing herbs too much. Mostly just using fresh.
Okay. Well, it's super, super easy to dry. So like tonight when I get home, I'm just going to lay these on the cookie sheet and lay them across the top of my oven.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And by tomorrow, they'll pretty much be dry because my house, because right now everything's drier here up north. I'm not sure where you're at, Marilyn, but everything's drier up here. And so it doesn't take it long at all with the heater going and the dry air ready. They'll be dry and ready to package by tomorrow when I get up.
I'm over by Columbus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit more humidity.
Yes. And you are in
I'm in Ainsworth. So
Ainsworth, okay.
Yes, right in the middle of the state, 25 miles from South Dakota border.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, out here in God's country.
Okay. I guess the other food that I might use is for kind of soup or gravy type things. Some things over chicken casseroles. And they do go real well with eggs.
Yes, yes, they do. Well, and the other thing is, I want people not to be afraid to go ahead and create their own, like if you do tacos, it's actually pennies on the dollar to make your own taco seasoning. And the recipe is in the packet in that booklet. And it's awesome. It is a very, very good recipe. I just keep a jar of it in my cupboard all the time. Fact is, the next demonstration we do, I'm going to show how to take just raw hamburger meat and add that into the hamburger meat, form it, mix it in, and make taco seasoning patties out of it. And then what I do at home is I just add the sour cream, the lettuce, and the tomato right on top of that hamburger patty. It's
That
really
sounds
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be good.
So, and it's like the onion soup mix. You can make these pennies on the dollar with the spices you have in your cupboard. So it's super fun. Thank you, Marilyn. Appreciate it.
Okay.
How about you, Linda?
Hi there. Now, I've just enjoyed your presentation. You've put together a lot of good ideas. I'm anxious to try them.
Oh, good. Well, I hope they're successful for you. I love playing with them. I'm always creating something new. Like tonight, I create the pumpkin pie spice sour cream mix is something I came up with a couple of days ago. But sour cream and sugar together make a really good dip. Take brown sugar. If you want a really quick apple dip, cream cheese and brown sugar. Makes almost like a caramel sauce. It's awesome. You can tell I'm a foodie.
Pat, she should put them on crescent rolls and bake them.
Yeah, that's just dangerous. That is just dangerous. That's going to be like a cinnamon roll thing. I'm going to be trying that, right?
It sure sounds good to me.
Me too. But yeah, I'm going to have my pork loin for supper first, though. I'm just saying. I keep burping it here because I'm not getting all the air out of it. And anytime you guys have any, if you have questions that come up, you can email me, you can call me. If you're not sure how to get a hold of me, get a hold of David, and he knows very well how to get a hold of me. So I'll help you out in any way I can.
We also have a quick poll for the two of you. If you please pull it out for us, that helps give us feedback on the program. And it's just a few questions. If you could answer those for us. We have multiple days of this program offered, and so we're trying to collect some data off of, how we did and any input that you may have. So if you'd please just click the answers for us. That would help us out. We'd really appreciate it.
Well, I tell you, I think I have sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg and all kinds of stuff all over. I cook like this at home too, right?
You bet. Any questions on the growing side that you have on growing and starting herbs?
I do, David.
Yes.
So is there any herb that does not go well with another herb when you're getting ready to plant it? So like say I'm planting basil, can I put rosemary with it, or is it going to be finicky and I can only put certain things with it?
There are certain combinations that are better. And I'm looking back at this publication from Missouri, especially with your onions and chives, anything like that can have a real strong flavor, can change the flavor. So it's best to keep your onions and your chives and your garlic, things like that, kind of away from those, from the rest, especially things that would be served in desserts or drinks, unless you really like something that might grow. Otherwise, it's usually pretty easy to grow a lot of your herbs together. It's best to kind of put some of your evergreen plants together, such as your thyme is an evergreen herb. So you want to put those guys together, such as myrtle. That's another one we don't really talk about, but that's another evergreen herb. So we want to kind of put them together in groupings. So your fine rooted ones, such as rosemary and lavender, for instance, like really light, well-drained soils, those need to be put together. So pairings, so a lot of it is growing habit, and anything strong such as onions, the garlic chives, and some of your walking onions that kind of fall into this world as well. Should be planted separate. Cilantro also is one that's really strong that people will plant just kind of in just plantings, nice little plantings together that go really well. We like to put more of our savory herbs together, and those work well to go. So for instance, with dill, do not plant with fennel. That one is one that we also talk about avoiding planting together. So fennel, they really kind of alter each other's flavor out. So that's another one that you'd want to avoid planting together, which is kind of ironic in a sense, because fennel is another one that also really works good in flower beds and does a really good job attracting our beneficial insects. So that's something else to think about.
Well, and fennel would be really pretty in landscaping too, because it's kind of I think some of those are fun.
It has real ferny-like foliage, and it works great. Lacewings love fennel for some reason to go there.
That's so fun. Huh, okay.
So, and that's the nice thing with the back of this Missouri publication, talks about some of those comments and recommendations on what grows in different situations, such as your evergreens, what reseeds, what grows really good in pots. Annual, like marjoram, is another one that's a good pot herb. That's one to think about. There's some that work good in alkaline soils. We have alkaline soils here in Nebraska. So for instance, horehound and anise are very good growing here. Some of those things are very traditional with the different types of ethnic groups that homesteaded here. So we think of the different types of herbs that were used in German and Czech and Swedish, Polish cooking, that some of those herbs were really popular. So that's another thing that sometimes you'll run into when people will say their family, a couple generations ago always liked certain things, and they had their herbs such as, anise with the seed that they would use to cook with, or a lot of dill or a lot of basil or some different things that are cool. So there's some historical aspect about it too, depending on what were traditional dishes in your family and your family's heritage. Very fascinating.
Well, and that would make sense because a lot of, up this way, we have, in some areas, we have a lot of Danish, and other areas we have a lot of German. But I was introduced a couple of years ago to a cookie, the anise cookie.
Yes.
And oh my goodness, it's a good cookie, but it takes days to make.
Mhm.
So, but it's, it's one of those, that would have been one of the reasons why they would have grown anise, because anise has that real strong licorice flavor to it.
And it survives in our soils.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
That was really appreciated, that it grows in our alkaline soils. The beautiful thing about a lot of our herbs is they will take our soil type, even the higher alkaline ability. The biggest thing is to make sure that our soils are well drained, especially with the fine fibrous rooted herbs, especially, once again, rosemary and lavender are very, very fine rooted, that rot out easy. Those are really good to raise in pots and containers, and you can grow them and move them indoors, in and around. So we talked about people putting crushed rosemary on, quartering potatoes with a little bit of olive oil and maybe a little bit of salt. And what they do is they would scatter the rosemary on and bake that. That was really popular. So that's
It's really good.
And so those are things that are very popular. A lot of your families that have French ancestry, for instance, love lavender. A lot of them brought lavender with them, or they grew lavender once they homesteaded here. And I grew up in an area of Kansas that had a lot of French settlements, and so they always made sachets. The older generations did those kind of things. I also grew up with quite a few Czechs, so they were used to using lots of dill and some of those other flavors that were interesting too. So that was part of that. That was literally a kitchen garden. So they grew the herbs as part of the garden because that's what they fixed their traditional ethnic dishes, or in the case of the lavender was used for a lot of sachets to put in with clothing. So it's
And
kind
it
of
kept the bugs, kept the bugs out of the clothes. So Linda and Marilyn, what are you guys thinking that you want to plant and play with?
I'm going to try some cilantro. I think that would be fun to try, as well as a pot like David had talked, with basil and some other complementary plants.
Awesome. I'm excited for you. Good. Marilyn.
I have a big pot of rosemary that I keep indoors and take it out every year. I don't really do any cooking with it, but I just like the rosemary scent. And then I grow dill and cilantro that comes up from seed every year out in the garden. It just reseeds itself. And I have lovage, onion, garlic. I have garlic chives and onion chives, and the walking onions. I have those that are perennial. I had oregano, but I didn't use it very much, so I took that out of the garden. It was spreading a lot. And I do have mint. I have mint in the garden. I'll have
Sounds
to
like-
maybe try some new stuff.
Yes, yes. Because it sounds like you have a nice variety started. Add something new. That'll be fun. I'm excited for you guys. This is that exciting time of year. It's just, I'm ready. I'm ready to do a container garden again.
I used to have fennel, and I grew that mostly for the attracting the pollinators. And I don't know if I work that area up at some time, but I've lost the reseeding. So now I have to start some more just to try to get it going so it'll reseed.
And you know, you bring up a really good point, is the reseeding of herbs, because I don't know, David, do a lot of herbs reseed themselves?
Some do, and that's really important to know. Dill will definitely reseed itself and does a beautiful job of sending up. We have dill in our flower beds and in front of the extension office for that very reason, because it just keeps on reseeding. And people will come out and they will pick the dill for canning. And we also keep a certain group out for our butterfly larvae. So that is one that self-seeds, lovage self-seeds, borage self-seeds. A bunch of them do. The coriander will reseed again. So we started it and there was a cilantro and it bloomed a white blossom, and then it went to seed and it dropped and it reseeded itself. So that works really easy. So it works really slick. Didn't have any problem with it. So I just had really easy work with it. Marjoram also is one that tends to reseed. So you've got several different options when it comes to plants that, even though they may not be a perennial, they act like a perennial because they drop.
The dill
fun.
and cilantro actually come up in the spring, and then towards maybe September, if you've let it reseed, they will come back again for the fall.
Yes, they come back thick, comes back very thick. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. So we do have really good luck with those. So, and comparing what it costs for a packet of seed to get started and get those things growing, and you've got them growing when you want them versus the price that you buy in the grocery store, it's amazing how much it is and how reasonable growing herbs at home really are. Because remember, our ancestors and the homesteaders didn't have the grocery store to go to. They just grew it on their own.
Well, and it's pennies on the dollar. I mean, literally pennies on the dollar. The packets that I had to go buy because I'm not a very good gardener, nor do I have a place. I have to rely on the store. Those little packets ran me anywhere from $3 to $5, and there was not very much in there. Some of them I only got like 2 or 3 sprigs of whatever I was buying, and some of them were quite generous. But here again, you're not getting a quality product either. I mean, I can show you time and time again, but the ones that I got, they're dying right and left. So yeah, I'm excited to get things growing.
Any more questions? One of you put in the information for the eval. If you'd please fill out the poll real quick, and then we can finish that up for tonight. But we really appreciate you participating in the class and letting us teach you. And it's a great opportunity to work with people. If you're a master gardener, this counts for professional development hours, your education hours. So it's a win-win.
When I push submit on the poll, it doesn't go anywhere. Are you seeing it?
I've got one that answered it and one that didn't.
Okay, I answered mine.
Okay. Okay, Linda, if you could answer real quick, I would greatly thank you. And then we're good to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies. And thank you for sharing. Much appreciated.
Thank you very
Nice.
much.
Nice, interesting topics.
Thank you. And you have a great evening.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you later.
All right.